Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zehr Institute's April webinar. We are grateful that you're with us today and are very excited for today's discussion. My name is Erin Bremer. I'm a graduate assistant for the Zehr Institute, and I'm going to start us off by going over our agenda. The Zehr Institute's Jonathan Swartz will begin by introducing our guests, who are cast members and filmmakers from the film The Prison Within. We'll then show the trailer for the film for those of you who have yet to see it, or as a refresher if it's been a while since you watched it. And then our guests will have a presentation. Following their discussion, there will be time for them to answer questions from you all. So as you're watching, please comment in the comment section of whichever platform it is you're using, any questions that you have for our presenters. And I see that there's lots of activity in the comments already. It's great to see that. Please also comment if you have any difficulties or challenges with understanding the speed of our guests' conversation or technical challenges. Finally, after that Q&A session, I will share an overview of next month's webinar and close our time out with some brief announcements. As always, you'll be able to access the recording of this webinar through either the Zehr Institute's website or YouTube channel. The recording will be uploaded by the end of this week so that you can come back to it or share it with other people. Thank you again for watching and participating, and now Jonathan will introduce us to our guests for today.
Good afternoon, morning, evening to you all from wherever you are. We're excited about today's webinar, The Prison Within, The Way Out is Through. And I'm excited to get to introduce our guests for today. First is Catherine Hervey. Catherine is an award-winning filmmaker who is interested in what is hiding in the dark corners of the American landscape and our collective psyches, believing truth is often found in the dark before it shines in the light. Her work as a documentary filmmaker is informed by 15 years in criminal justice and prison reform, where she's worked as a filmmaker and content creator, activist, restorative justice advocate, and trial attorney. She's also a thought leader in the field of reform, featured on the Black News Channel, Business Insider, The Guardian, and Forbes. Welcome, Catherine. Excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Next is Troy Williams. Williams spent 25 years of his life in juvenile and adult prison facilities. While incarcerated, he became a certified paralegal, wrote for San Quentin News, and founded a video and the first award-winning audio production program within a prison called the San Quentin Prison Report. Williams also served as the executive director of San Quentin's Restorative Justice Interfaith Roundtable, initiated TEDx San Quentin, and spearheaded efforts to build San Quentin's Media Lab. 10 months after being paroled, Williams went back inside as a free man and gave a TED Talk at TEDx San Quentin. He served on the Alameda County's Probation Chiefs Advisory Council, San Francisco District Attorney's Advisory Board, and Oakland's Public Safety and Services Oversight Commission. He currently maintains board membership with the Oakland Private Industry Council, the Prism Way, the Ahimsa Collective, and the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice. Welcome, Troy. Excited to have you here today.
Glad to be here.
Next is Sonya Shah. Sonya Shah initiated the Ahimsa Collective in 2016. She is also an associate professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Central to her core values are nurturing community belonging and collective care, healing, compassion, love, and transforming harm. She is Buddhist, a first-generation immigrant from the northwestern part of India, and feels most at home in nature. She has two amazing children who remind her what it means to be in love all of the time, and currently resides in Northern California. Welcome, Sonya. It's good to have you today. Sujatha Baliga. Sujatha Baliga's work is characterized by an equal dedication to people who have experienced and caused harm and violence. A former victim advocate and public defender, Sujatha is a frequent guest lecturer at universities and conferences about her decades of restorative justice work. She also speaks publicly and inside prisons about her own experiences as a survivor of child sexual abuse and her path to forgiveness. In her most recent position, directing the Restorative Justice Project, Sujatha helped communities across the U.S. implement restorative justice alternatives to youth criminalization. Today, she is exploring restorative justice approaches to ending intimate partner and sexual violence. A 2019 MacArthur Fellow, her personal and research interests include the forgiveness of seemingly unforgivable acts, survival-led anti-carceral movements, restorative justice's potential impact on ending racialized mass criminalization, and Buddhist approaches to conflict transformation. She's a member of the Gyoto Foundation in Richmond, California, where she leads meditation on Monday nights. Sujatha makes her home in Northern California with her partner of 26 years and their 17-year-old child. She is writing her first book. Sujatha, it's good to have you here today. And last but certainly not least, Michael Nelson. Michael Nelson serves as the executive director of Kid Cat, a nonprofit aimed at bridging the gap between harm and healing, while supporting the incarcerated youth offender population, those serving adult life sentences for crimes they committed during their youth. As a co-founder of the original prison program, Kid Cat of San Quentin, Michael is responsible for replicating the program at the California Men's Colony of San Luis Obispo, which he has overseen since 2018, and for continuing on with the mission and vision of the founders. The goal is to be able to provide access to the program throughout prisons across California and beyond. During his 20 years of incarceration, in addition to becoming a certified crisis counselor, completing his AA degree through Mount Tamalpais College, formerly Prison University Project, and becoming a service dog trainer, Michael also learned the skill of being a circle keeper through the Victim Offender Education Group, and created Acting with Compassion and Truth, now known as All Right Justice, a program originally aimed at creating a supportive space for incarcerated gay, bi, and transgender incarcerated persons and their allies. As a person with lived experience of being directly impacted by the prison system, Michael believes in advocating for the integrity of prison programs created and designed by and for the incarcerated. Welcome, Michael. It's exciting to have you here as well with us today. Oh, and it wasn't last but not least, but finally, last but not least, Erin Kenway. Erin Kenway received her Juris Doctorate from Seattle University School of Law and was admitted to the Order of the Barristers, a national honor society for graduates who demonstrate exceptional skill in trial advocacy, oral advocacy, and brief writing. After graduating, her primary focus in private practice was civil litigation and family law. She also founded a legal clinic for pro se self-represented litigants inside a confidential women's shelter to provide limited legal services, guidance on navigating the complexity of family court, and oral advocacy coaching. She is proud that every pro se litigant she advised prevailed in their court hearing, despite facing experienced family law attorneys who represented their abusers. Erin has continued to be active and involved in the Seattle University School of Law community, serving as a strategic advisor and fundraising campaign leader for the DVPO Clinic and on the planning committee for the annual Domestic Violence Symposium. Welcome, Erin. A reminder to all of you who are watching this, no matter what platform you are watching from, make comments, questions using the comment section of the platform that you are watching from. How this is going to, how this will work is in a little bit here, in a couple minutes, I will remove all of us from the stage and we're going to show the Prison Within official trailer. It's about a minute and a half long. After the trailer is shown, I will add our 6 wonderful guests back onto the stage, into the stream, and they are going to act as hosts and guests, all of them, and engage in asking each other questions and conversation. As they go along, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. We may address some as they come up, but we'll definitely get a chance to address some of the questions in the question and answer time towards the end. So I'm going to remove us from the stage and show the trailer.
He, in cold blood, gunned down my husband and then stood over him and kept shooting.
I did come to prison because I did something terrible. I killed somebody.
I am only in just a murderer.
I was an instrument of destruction.
I am a conservative hardliner. And I got the death penalty. I got what I wanted. Nothing changed. I didn't feel better. It didn't work.
Coming to San Quentin, though, is actually what put everything in perspective.
It's really about being on a journey together to connect the dots of their lives that led to a crime, to walk deeply and profoundly in accountability.
I'm sorry for taking your son.
In the way that you allow survivors to come in and say what we need to say, I can't even begin to quantify how healing that has been for me. It's how this system should work.
Do you want him to remain on death row?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Hurt people, and we've been hurting each other forever. It's time for change.
I think we're just waiting for our host, correct? To come back on. Correct?
I guess.
Here he comes.
Here I am.
We're so patient.
The way this will work is we've invited our guests have invited each other to each ask a question to two of their fellow guests and participants. And so we're going to start with Sujatha asking a question to Catherine and Troy, and then Troy will ask question Sonya, Aaron, Catherine, and Michael. I'm going to remove myself from the stage so that it is more visually appealing with 2 rows of participants rather than 3. But that's how it will go. Sujatha, welcome to start us off.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for this opportunity to reconnect with everyone. Some of the folks who were in the film, it's just wonderful to revisit. So one of my favorite parts of the film is, Troy, when you are talking about hearing from a surrogate victim, telling her story, and really getting like the impact that a crime that she had experienced had on her. And at that moment, it also really helped you wake up to your own defense mechanisms, which weren't the same as hers, but at the same time, right? You speak about that pretty regularly, but there's this way in which it's captured in the film that really brings it home for me. And so, it's such a beautiful description of the simultaneous empathy and self-awareness that comes from hearing other people's stories. And so both Catherine and Troy, you're both deeply involved in this kind of what I'd call restorative storytelling in various forms of media, right? That opens our hearts to ourselves and to others. So in a sense, this film, interestingly, does what Troy is talking about throughout the whole film, right? It's like it's this kind of meta experience of the film itself. So a good film like The Prison Within makes it look effortless, but you all know that that takes a lot of work. And so if you could tell us a little bit more about what the work was, both in this film, but in filmmaking in general, that makes that particular magic happen about that kind of restorative storytelling where we're opening up to both the people we're seeing on the screen, but something is happening where we're seeing ourselves, that mirror window experience. If you could talk about that, and I let you guys choose who wants to go first on that one.
I'll yield to Catherine.
Oh gosh, okay. I mean, I love that you're saying that, Sujatha, because that was such a big intention for myself, was for people to see themselves reflected in the film, like to roll in thinking, I have nothing in common with Michael or with Troy or with Poon or with Sam or, anyone in the film. And for them to say, okay, I get it, right? Like, okay, I get it. And like maybe even take it a step further and saying, oh, well, that could be me too, but for a certain set of circumstances. And that was really important for me to bring forward. And so I think, but you're right. Like, it's not easy, right? Like, you have to keep trying and editing and getting that right, like, And I would say that for me, I mean, I think it requires a lot of honesty, really, for me being like, okay, like if I were watching this, what would be the things that I don't want to look at within myself, right? As I'm watching this, and like, how can we kind of what would need to happen for me to break through for that, right? And so then what would need to happen for other people to break through for that? And I think it was also just really coming at it with so much love and respect for everyone that was in the film. And that being, I think, the most important component of making a documentary, any documentary, is what am I saying here? Like, what am I trying to say here? And is what I'm trying to say really calling forth love and empathy and compassion in the world and in other people? And if I feel that it's not, then I'm, then back up and do something else. And so, yeah, I think it's, bringing myself forward with love and then calling forth love in the same time in the editing room. Check.
Really appreciate that. Check. I really appreciate hearing that. And I think my process is very similar, but it's probably why we collaborate so well together. In one sense, it all begins with, like, I think like Catherine said, like, just being honest, like honest with yourself about what you're intending to put across, and how you're like, how your words or what you say, or how your art is going to impact the world, and then being able to like listen to what people are giving you, right? I guess the best way for me to relate it to is, how, like, if you're from a certain area or you grew up in a certain time or certain area, and somebody, like, those little idiosyncrasies that people do or say or speak, or they walk, they swag, like however you want to, those little subtleties that happen with individuals, that you be like I was talking to somebody the other day, and first we were all like just so professional in our like business mode, and then I started talking about Oakland, and then like she went right into an Oakland swag, right? And the moment that she did that, it's like, yep, this, I knew she grew up in Oakland, right? It's like those little subtleties like that people only get to see if you're like sort of, for lack of a better term, in the in crowd, like, so to speak. I don't know why them bubbles came up. Did I do that? Are them the hand gesture things? Right. but it's those there are those subtleties that allow you to see, right? And so when I heard the woman speak to her trauma, I was really in an honest like search to like I really wanted to understand, because as I always talk about, being in relating to fear is something that I had dealt with for so long that I've forgot my process of dealing with it. It just became like natural that this happens, bam, you respond like this happens, and then you forget your process, and then you have to go back and remember your process. And being in the company of people who can understand the subtleties of their process actually helped me. And I think that's what I try to do at my work. I think that's what Catherine has been effectively been able to do with this film, is like try to point out some of those subtleties that allow you to really get a picture into somebody's life that you otherwise would not have a clue about. And that picture allows your humanity to see their humanity and vice versa. I think I'll end that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I think, Troy, you're up next for asking a question.
Ooh, always the difficult. I think I'm supposed to ask Aaron and Sonya, right?
I think so, yeah.
Two of my buddies. Sonya, know it's coming, huh?
Oh.
No, I just want to say first, truly, I appreciate both of you. And I think my question is, well, first, Sonya, like we go so far back, you were one of the first people who introduced me to the concept of like restorative justice. Like I know that, the phrasing of restorative justice and the practice of it from the setting through the lens that you brought in with the programs that you came in, like that you came into the prison with. And nowadays, like restorative justice is like a really big like thing now, right? And so I think my question for both you and Aaron is like, how do you see the concepts of restorative justice played out in the film, and overall, how do we bring more of this like to the world, to the mainstream, to so that we can become more unified in the work that's being done? I hope I asked that in a good way.
That's beautiful. Aaron, do you want to go first? You want me to?
No, why don't you go first?
Okay. Since Troy was putting me on, actually I was getting a little emotional here. It's kind of interesting always to like sit on a thing with like three people you've known for like a combined 60 years, Sujatha, Troy, and Mike. So it's a really beautiful thing to share screen with intimacy, and not just like, oh, we're just a bunch of heads. So I think the thing about the film is that, and in the process of like restorative or transformative justice or anything that's about healing harm, transforming harm, or accountability, is that it's showing the journey of the hard work inside of that, right? It's really like the hard processing work that people do to grapple with their own feelings of guilt or shame or, grief or anger or, sadness, loss, whatever it is, and what it takes for us to be in like a lifelong relationship to all of those things. And unfortunately, we exist in a society and culture that doesn't forefront those or value those things. We don't exist in a society that forefronts like a community of care over a culture of transaction, success. What do I get? What we teach our kids in school is how to get into college and how to keep working up the chain, as opposed to how do I care about my friends? What do I do if somebody's hurt? What is the value of empathy? So if we're in a culture where we're not in a culture where we're built on like a currency of care versus a currency of like success. That's the issue. So I think what would make us successful in the land of transforming harm, safety, accountability, real safety, real healing would be every one of us on this screen committing in a way that we do to like getting up in the morning and making our cup of tea and driving our car and going to work is a culture of care and culture of safety and a culture of self-reflection and understanding kind of, there's nothing about this, it's always a little bit hard for me to watch kind of the sort of people in prison bearing their souls and being vulnerable, because honestly, what they're doing is something that the rest of the world isn't often doing. And why we gravitate towards that is because we're not doing it, but they are, and we're making films about it, right? And I also love Catherine because I really have a great story of why I felt like I trusted Catherine because of how she came into this work. But I think the highlight there is not about there are these people in prison doing great accountability work. The highlight there are these people that have learned how to truly look at themselves in a way that we all could learn from. And so I guess that's what I think we all need to do, myself included. I do it well sometimes. I am horrible at other times and will bypass all my emotions and tell you that I have the answer. And when we can be honest with ourselves about when we're actually doing the work versus like spewing out what we think we know, I think we'll be in good shape.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most amazing aspects of learning about restorative justice, which of course I didn't have much experience with that until Catherine and I met and we started working on this project together. It's really about, to me, what I take away from understanding how to engage in the world. It's about attempting to really have like this active involvement in responding to harm. It's not a passive responsibility. And I feel like our justice system and even just the way we engage in the world is really about that passive responsibility. Your children don't do what they're supposed to do, they get grounded. They're constantly responding. The world responds in a way that they don't actually get to engage in healing what has happened. And for me, I try to do what I call radical self-interrogation, where I'm constantly looking at what I'm doing and how I'm interacting with the world and how I'm teaching others to interact with the world, whether it's through my philanthropic work, through family law practicing, through being a parent of 2 kids. I'm trying to constantly see how we can navigate all the different ups and downs that are going to occur. I have a preteen, and let me tell you, the middle school girl drama thing is going to happen. And we have a lot of conversations about what that means. Some of it's developmental, some of it's supposed to be this way. Some of it's just trying on new hats, because that is what you're supposed to do while you're discovering who you are as a young woman in this world. And I think that if we can really have some humility and understand that some of these conversations that we're going to have, or some of these reflective moments, are going to be hard, and we're going to have to look at ourselves in a mirror and maybe not like what we see, but you have the opportunity, this active responsibility to adjust and tweak. And we should really create a society that is open to those changes and shifts, instead of labeling someone the second you label someone, the second you see them. Troy, you're a criminal for life. No, you're not. You're a human. You actually have this incredible story. And you should not be defined by that one worst thing you've ever done. Or for me, I'm a crime survivor, the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So I just really think that when we shift over to this like active responsibility, then we can work together as a community to really thrive.
Yeah. And thank you. I do want to just say, give my respect to you as well. I appreciate how you always check in, like even when we go somewhere and do something, like you always like checking in, like, and I just, not many people do that, so I just wanted to say I appreciate that as well. And I'm not sure who's asking the next question. Oh, Sonya, there you go. I relinquished the mic.
Thank you. I think the mic from Troy is like a whole thing, so I appreciate the relinquishment. So So my question is for Mike Nelson and Sujatha, and these are, again, I feel so emotional as I have learned so much from both of these people. I have grown from my sort of personal relationships and professional relationships from both of you. So I was sitting here thinking, like, what the F could I ask them that would be actually like, you know, I don't know, not make me seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think what I want to say about both of you is that, Sujatha, what I've learned from you is not only are you so fierce and you jump in the fire, and I've learned a little bit more about how to jump in the fire and sort of be in problems, but also this constant grappling with like how we tend to ourselves while we tend to the world. And I think from Mike, I've learned from you how to really like take my time to process what I'm feeling and experiencing and not let the world rush me. And so I think sometimes people think that we just sort of show up and we're like these amazing beings that just kind of got here without the journey of our life experiences that have actually led us to become the amazing people that you two are. And in the film, you both, I think, Mike, you do a lot of like sort of demonstrating your process. And Sujatha, you articulate so much about who you are. So I think what I want to ask you is twofold. One is like, can you tell us a little bit about your journey of how you kind of got to that place where you were able to like understand how your inner and outer worlds relate to each other? And then, because I'm just going to put you on the spot, because this is what we do, is like, what's working you right now? Like, what are you grappling with in terms of your inner and outer world and things that are going on? So two-part. Go. No, just kidding. Anybody who wants to go first, please do.
Mike, you want to go? No? Okay, I'll go. Okay. So my journey to this work and the inner and outer thing for me really was, and a part of why, I pre-pandemic, I spent more time inside prison. There's a rock bottomness that that required me to deal with my, what's the swearing stuff that happens on these webinars? Everyone who's on this is dangerous doing this call, because those who are closest to me know I have a potty mouth. And it's really, so but when I'm in professional context, I don't curse so much. Zehr is saying, go for it. Okay, I'm going to curse. So tamely, compared to what those of you who know me know what I really do. Okay, so, I had to work on my shit. Like there was no option to not. I was at death's doorstep, causing it myself in my 20s. And there wasn't like, I had these aspirations for like upending every single kind of injustice, from like the death penalty to what was going into law school. I was literally falling apart at the seams. There was no option but to save my own life first, right? Like that's not an option to do otherwise. So, and so for me, that journey has been one. For me, I'm Buddhist. And so for me, it's been meditation first and foremost. It's taking every year I would go away on a 10-day silent meditation retreat every year during law school when I was 7 months pregnant. Like I do it. I just came out of a 25-day solitary silent meditation time that I had been gearing up and getting ready for 2 years. And so, people are like, where'd Sujatha go? Like this relates in part, Sonya, to what you're saying about Mike telling you slow down. Like the world is flying by. I miss so many things I'm supposed to be at all the time, because I have to do the inner work. We talk about micro, meso, macro work all the time. And there's this, there's a scholar, Netta Avenetti, who talks about the micro work, that if we don't do the micro, we can't do the micro, meso, macro. And so there's no option. And also, I can't teach what I am not doing myself. I lead meditation now. And so both between the restorative justice work and my meditation work, if I'm an impatient, freaked out, angry, whatever, right? If I'm not listening to other people when I'm trying to teach other people how to deep listen, like that's just not okay. So, I think that one of the beauties of putting myself in uncomfortable positions and pushing myself further requires me to do that. And what I'm grappling with now, Sonya, thank you for asking that question. It really is about integrating my own spiritual background, practice, and journey with the work of restorative justice. I'm writing a book now about forgiveness, which, I'm sort of coming out as a Buddhist. Like, there's not a lot of space, particularly for, ironically, Asians, as sort of leaders and thought leaders in Buddhism in America. And so for me, a lot of what I'm grappling with is what I think of as like the law's middle way. What are Buddhist offerings to restorative justice? And I grapple with that in relationship to commodification and sales. So it's like restorative. So the Buddha was like, everything is free. Like, you don't get paid. It's all by dana, right? And then this has been my career, which I've also tried really hard not to like charge anybody for trainings or whatever. And so what is this? And restorative justice, as it grows, is getting commercialized and co-opted, and Buddhism is, meditation, mindfulness. They've been doing that. So like, how do I live in the world, not as a monastic, not as a, I don't know what, and find a way to do this work moving forward that doesn't sell out the underlying bits of things, both on the restorative justice and the meditation side. So thank you for the question. Mike, I'd love to hear your answer to these things.
Thank you. And I appreciate that we got permission to curse. Because I too am somebody that has colorful language. Sonya, thank you for the questions. Of course, you're going to the deep stuff. As one of my teachers, I expect nothing less. So I appreciate you and the space holding around these questions. I'm in a very tender space right now, I'm realizing. And even with your questions, it's like activating. The second question especially is activating some of that. And I have to say, every time I watch this film, that opening music and the sirens always gets me. And I joke and say that I'm known as the crier of the film because Catherine, she captured all these shots of me wiping the tissues. And so to form, as that trailer was playing, I was wiping away the tissues before the screen came back on. The journey, that's such a big question. I guess I want to start by saying that I'm somebody who's responsible for deep harm in the world. For 15 years, I lived as a hurt, and I didn't know how to access my own hurt. And at the age of 15, I murdered somebody. And at that point, it was no longer about this hurt 15-year-old. Now I'm navigating through the world as somebody who's now holding this very deep and complex truth that I'm also responsible for deep harm in the world. And how do I live with that? How do I navigate not only myself, but this big world? And for me, that was incarceration. And I remember very vividly that first night that I was in juvenile hall, and after all the interrogations and phone calls to my aunt and crying and down by the officers, and I remember being put in my cell and that big iron door shut and the whatever the clasp, the door locked, and for the first time in 15 years, I can remember feeling super relieved, like I could breathe, like I could pause, like I didn't have to hold all the responsibilities that were given to me as a child that weren't mine. And I knew then, I didn't have the language for it. I didn't know how to access what was coming up for me, but there was something in my being and my truth that I knew that I was now on a different path, and I didn't know what to do with that. But years later, fast forward, I was introduced to restorative justice, to circle keeping, to the Vogue program, to folks like Sonya. And I was given permission to look at my shit. And my shit being all the stuff that I felt harm child, my shit being the impact that I have had in the world with the harm that I'm responsible for. And it was really difficult. It was hard. It was scary. And the most liberating, besides skydiving, the most liberating experience that I've ever had, to be confronted, to be be held in a very loving, compassionate, and accountable way. And so that continues. The journey continues. It hasn't stopped. You know, as you mentioned, Sonya, like I joke and say I'm very messy. I'm very, I'm just human.
And so I will be reminded of the parts of myself that are still in need of accountability, in need of looking at. But that's where the journey began, was having a space in community where I could look at myself and then be held, which I feel like is lacking so much in the world. And that journey continues. And I hope that it's long, that's not lost upon me. I'm forgetting the word that you used, but like, what's activated with me today, what's being charged. And in this moment of tenderness, I'm realizing I'm in Texas right now for a conference around artificial intelligence and prosecution. I'm invited to sit on the panel with these amazing people with these amazing backgrounds and experiences and letters behind their names. And the first question that I asked when I was on an introduction Zoom meeting is, why am I here? I don't know why I was invited. And I'm realizing, sitting in this space today before I came on this call, is that I still struggle, and it's hard for me to say out loud, is that this narrative that my voice is less than, that my voice matters as much as everyone else's, including on this panel. I was nervous coming on here because of all these wonderful, amazing people, and I still continue to struggle with that narrative, that my voice does not matter as much. And I know that since my release from prison almost 6 years ago, that I have gotten in my own way with that narrative, that it prevents me from reaching, I don't know if it's my fullest potential, but the fullness of all that I can offer. And so that feels really alive for me today. And so I appreciate the question, because it allows me to check in with that. And really hold that for myself. So thank you. And I'm going to check with that.
Yeah. I just want to say, before we transition to Aaron, just thank you for your vulnerability and always willing to share that. It's a gift, and you are a gift. And so just leaving with that, so much more later. Thank you so much, Sujatha. And I will pass it over to, I think, Aaron, you are the next questioner.
I just want to echo that too. So
we all love you, Michael. And it's actually part of my growth has actually come from working with you directly. And you know that. We've talked about it offline. And you have an incredible gift to heal the harm in others, whether you know it or not. Everyone that's listening right now, whether they take the time to realize we all have that imposter syndrome that we live, walk into a room, whatever it is, whether it's a Julia Roberts moment in a department store, or whether you're on a panel discussion with other academics, I feel it in the room. I'm the only one that's not a trained restorative justice practitioner. So I can tell you I had quite a few butterflies. And it's also difficult as someone who wants to be an advocate and a partner to help kind of heal what's going on in our criminal legal system with those who have committed harm, and those who are kind of representing those who've committed harm, or those who are changing the policy system. And unfortunately, you get judged a lot in this space. You're not a social worker enough. You're not. You don't have enough degrees. You haven't been practicing as long. You haven't been incarcerated. There's all this judgment around it, and I think that is one of the things we could stop. Is allowing people just honestly come to the space and see what everyone has to say from their own lived experiences, which kind of leads me into the question I have for you and Troy, which is, this film could not possibly have told the complexities of each of your lived experiences. In fact, it was very much an intention Catherine and I had talking repeatedly many times in the editing booth about how much do we share? Because this isn't a biography, and we wanted to honor your own voices and your stories, so that the details of kind of your own story weren't really brought out. One, it's distracting for the audience because we wouldn't have time to really honor the entire truth, right? The whole bubble. We would have had a 5-hour, Ken Burns documentary, and it really was about showing instead that transformational process of restorative justice. So after all the press and all the interviews that you guys have done, and even as a restorative justice practitioner, presenting at conferences and things like that, what's the one thing about your lived experiences that no one's ever asked you, that you wish you've had a chance to share, but you hadn't had the chance yet? So that's my question to you. Troy, do you want to go first? I think Michael's taking a second off screen. You're on mute, sweetheart.
I forgot I put myself on mute.
That's because we know we have to put you on mute sometimes.
There y'all go. Out of you and Sonya today. Oh Lord. All right. You know, it's such a deep question, and I think depending on when you ask me that question, I might answer it differently. I think that I've been very willing to share like who I am and be open about who I am. I specifically came home with the intention of not hiding pieces of myself, you know, because I came home, you know, at a time when it still was not good to say you had been incarcerated because of such, you know, I think some things are easing, at least in parts of California, right? But you know, for the most part, it still has been very not real safe to say I'm a formerly incarcerated person. And I didn't want to hide that from myself, right? I think the hardest thing that probably I get the fewest questions around is around like really having meaningful partnership, like relationships, and how to navigate that aspect and how to navigate some of the dynamics with family. Like, you know, in many cases, our families are the greatest ones that we love, and oftentimes some of the greatest sources of our pain. So it's like that deep level of complexity that happens there. I have not seen much in the way of, and I guess it's such a difficult thing for everyone, but I have not seen much in the way of actually being able to navigate relationships when you come home, you know, in cases with your family or in cases of trying to, you know, I was gone for 20 years and I wasn't good at relationships before I left, right? So coming home trying to figure out the whole new dynamic around how the world is moving and how, you know, things are happening has been quite confusing. In many cases I felt like Rip Van Winkle coming back into this modern day time, you know, with the as a hopeless romantic looking for something that like I don't even know if it exists, you know. So at least, you know, I don't know, maybe that was a little bit much. I do think it exists. You know, I've actually watched, it's kind of ironic that my whole life I always say this, I was looking for a love story and found it in my backyard, you know, like with my parents watching my mother and my father, you know, navigate like their relationship of 57 years, which I don't, it's rare, you know, it's rare. So I don't know. I feel like I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but I think my thing, just the biggest question is around like relationships, navigating that. I think that's some of the hardest parts, and being able to, like, a lot of times I have felt like because so many people come to me for answers, like I'm supposed to have the answers now, and as though I'm not, like I can't be the one questioning or having questions, because if I have the questions, then how am I, you know, how am I like leading the way? Um, you know, there's this dynamic in which we expect people, because they're in a leadership position, to know everything and to have all the answers, and it's just not true in my experiences, and it's not true in society. And always jokingly I say this to people, like I'm a doctor, a scientist, and a guru when it comes to your stuff, but let me go through something and I need somebody to hold my hand, right? I need somebody to walk with me too. And I think Like, I think we need more of that in our society, where one person isn't like given this ultimate, like, end all or be all sort of position. And the truth is, we're a community, we're a village, and there are times that we play different roles in this village, and there are times that I'm very aware and I'm very conscious and I'm very on point, and then there are times when I need to be like comforted. I need something different. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Michael, you stepped away for a second. Did you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, I was gonna be transparent and say I missed that. I think it was if there was a question that somebody could ask me that hasn't been asked, what would it be?
It's essentially, what's the one thing kind of that no one has asked you that you wish you've had a chance to share?
In all transparency,
This might not be the moment.
Yeah, I wasn't right because we changed the order of the questions. I was like, oh shit, I'm up again. Okay. And the breathing is not working. I think I have been asked this question, and I think I'm more prepared to accept it today. So in 2018, I remember very vividly, Sonya actually asked me this question, and I was newly out of prison. I was overwhelmed, overstimulated, depressed, and just dealing with a lot of big feelings that I thought I was equipped for coming out. And then life said, you still have some work to do. But I remember Sonya asking, what do you need? And I remember in that moment, at that time in my life, I said, my mom. And it seems very fitting right now because I've spent the last 3 days with my mom. I feel very blessed to spend this time with her before this other thing. And I also want to say I'm very tired because we've stayed up till like 3 or 4 in the morning every night. And so maybe that's what's going on too. I need some sleep. But there's still part of me, adult and child me, that yearns for that connection from the person that I felt deeply harmed by growing up, that I felt a disconnect from, that I felt removed from. And so that part is still very much alive for me. So the question of what do you need, any time in my life that can sound, it can be received, it can mean something totally different. And in the work that I do, and I believe that we all do, especially in the conversation of restorative justice, that's such an important question. What do you need? We can talk about the harm, we can talk about the trauma, we can talk about all the heavy shit, and we're talking to human beings that have needs. And so it's such an important and powerful reminder when Sonya talks about this reminder of pausing and slowing down, that question gives us permission to do so. And it comes from a place of wonderment. It comes from a place of deep desire of knowing someone and caring for somebody and just checking in because we matter. So that's such a big question. And that question has come up for me over the years since then. Something triggers it. And I remember Sonya's voice saying, what do you need? And I realized these last 2 days with my mother, we've spent all night of these nights talking about family, our elders, culture, different memories from childhood. And so now today in this moment, I realize that when I say I need my mother, I want to feel connected to my roots. I want to feel connected to my elders. I want to feel connected to all the histories that have led me to become who I am today. So it's so much bigger today, my answer. I think I'm asking for and encouraging all of us to continue asking that question, even if it is asked, because it can change over time, and our needs change over time. So that would be the one for me, I think. Check.
Really, I mean, that's the thing. We all need something. I think I'm kicking this over to Catherine. I think you're the next one asking questions here.
Yes. Wow, thank you so much, everyone, for such beautiful, thoughtful questions and responses. So mine here, in my notes. So in reading the description of the film for this webinar, I kept coming back to the line, anger and violence stem from untreated trauma. This is true. And when we wrote this, we were talking about it in a criminal justice context. But in a more general restorative context, anger, like conflict, is not a bad thing, right? Like it's perceived as a negative emotion. And if we experience it, then we're bad. We're doing something wrong. I shouldn't be angry, right? But there's a school of thought, and I should have looked up the author. And also, what I truly believe is that anger is a natural and valid emotion that occurs when we really care about something, right? Like, you've harmed me, or you've harmed someone I love, or you're doing something that really harms my value system and things that I believe very deeply in, and I'm fucking pissed, right? And so my question is, since anger is something that, that's an emotion that occurs when we care deeply about something, then it becomes like what we do with that anger is what really matters, right? So we're not shaming ourselves for being angry, but now what do we do with that? And so my question is, what is one of the tools in your toolbox, and I think Erin and Sonya, where you've learned to transform anger in more restorative ways?
Erin, I'm going to check in with you again if you'd rather go first. You want me to go first? Either way.
I'd love to hear you.
Sure, I'm good with either one. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Catherine. I feel like this is a super juicy, wonderful question. So I think and I am 100% in your page. I think some of the ways in which, if I connect it back to kind of, let's say, the film or the way people who come into prison do work, has been very kind of with this, like a little bit of like a modeled particular Western psychology that's a little bit like old school, little classic around like, well, anger is a secondary emotion and not the primary emotion. And there's a little bit of like this behavioral drilling of like, what do you really feel, right? Like what's really under that? But maybe there's nothing under that, right? Maybe you're just angry. And I think I would say that, and I also think psychology and Western psychology has come a really long way. And I think what is much more robust is just to ask ourselves like a couple of questions. Like sometimes I'm just angry and I love my anger so much. And my anger is actually a gateway into telling me so much more about myself. Like I'm actually a little angry right now about certain things. And I'm so not in a space of pushing it away or saying I shouldn't be. If anything, kind of learning from some people on this panel, but also I see a therapist once a month for like the last 15 years. And the one thing that she's really helped me understand is how much my anger is around gender and how much it's around like like patriarchy and sort of the social conditions that have not allowed me space to actually feel like I get to say the thing that I need. And so that when I start to actually feel that anger, I'm like, oh, it's about injustice that I'm experiencing right now. That's what I'm feeling. It's not that I shouldn't feel the injustice or the anger. It's like, how do I start to recognize that that's actually what I'm feeling? So the way that I've sort of seen my anger is kind of like this incredible gift and a gateway into like, what am I, like, maybe it is the only thing that I am feeling. Maybe I'm feeling that and there's like 5,000 other feelings I'm having underneath. Maybe I am sad. Maybe I'm not sad. Maybe I'm like having grief. Maybe I want to reconcile. Maybe I don't. But instead of kind of, I think, getting away from this very like Western singular modality way of thinking that it is something, and then you have to feel differently, which is again back to telling people how to act. The question shouldn't be like, why are you feeling angry? Or it should be like what are the myriad of feelings you're having? You know, if you're feeling that, you might also be feeling other things. Just where's the space where if you want to dig deeper, maybe there's more there, maybe it's just anger, and that's just okay. So I feel like a way that we can really see this in a different kind of way, you know, for ourselves, gives us a lot more space just to be, and to forefront sort of like that piece about our own agency, deciding how we feel, as opposed to somebody telling us how we feel, which I think a lot of us have experienced that way, that people just sort of like tell us how we feel, or like tell us the model of how we get to transformation, which is just not true. Your model is the way you go, you know, which includes a lot of anger. I think also the thing I want to say, which I feel like is really something we need to get away from in this whole like restorative transformative justice process, is that like somehow that our goal is to be restorative, which is not always the case for me. Like it's not, you know, I think like that once you become a practitioner, everybody thinks that like that everything I do is going to be somehow like, oh, like I'm going to be back to being like besties with everybody, or I'm going to work through everything, or we're going to be restorative. And honestly, that's not always my goal. Sometimes my goal is to accept that the injustice was so much and it hurt me so bad that what I need right now is to not talk to you, and maybe not have a relationship with you, or not be friends with you. And that is the end of that journey that I need. And maybe one day it will change, maybe it won't. But I'm in an active relationship with myself, my feelings, and the other person who I can't control, and sort of like which direction we're going to go in. So I think this idea that somehow we have to transform our anger into something softer, we kind of need to do away with that. I think we need to just sort of accept that we just have feelings. We're in an active relationship with them, and we're choosing to be in an active relationship with humanity. Whether the other side wants to engage or not engage or whatever it is, that's not something I can control. There are times in my life that I am actually going to say, I am really angry and I don't want this relationship anymore. And there are times in my life that I'm going to say, I'm really angry. I'm also feeling other things, and I want this relationship. And it's really up to me to decide. And I think that that's sort of how I would take all of this. And I also don't think that it's like even just like there's this school of thought and one school of thought. I feel like we need to like unpack the colonial mindset, where it's like, you know, the fact that we have any like model or modality telling us a way to think comes from colonialism and like a capitalist mindset, right? Nothing should be here telling us that there's one way to think. I just want to say one last thing, which is I understand that there have been times like I met this person in Valley State Prison who said this thing about AA. I was never really into any of those AA things, but he loved it. And he said, you know, there are times in your life where people just really need structure, and that like going to NA and going to AA and having a lot of structure, it was like a life vest. It was like somebody threw me the lifeboat and I got in. But then once I got in, I felt like I outgrew it, and it was actually holding me in the water. It wasn't allowing me to grow, right? So I think one thing that and my saying this is not to sort of put down anything that is more structured or modeled. It's just to say that different strokes for different folks, right? Somebody might need a lot of structure, and someone else is like, just give me like an idea and I'll roll with it. And the point of like sort of our work is to figure out like what we need and who needs what, and to honor both the places where structure is really helpful and structure kind of gets in the way. So thank you for that amazing question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Sonya, I really on board with everything that you are sharing. I think one of the other unique aspects, I'm, looking back at the language as well, Catherine, that we wrote, where anger and violence stem from untreated trauma, which again is true. But I think anger and violence can stem without trauma as kind of that catalyst. And I think that what we were trying to articulate in writing that out is that when you have untreated trauma, it can serve as this fairly almost obvious catalyst that's going to occur. Like there's usually something down the line that's going to happen as a result of the untreated trauma, which is where we were, sharing when we articulate more about the film and kind of what we're trying to unpack there. I think when it comes to a toolbox and really thinking about what you said about what I've learned to transform that anger in a more restorative way, usually for me, I see anger as an unmet need. And I know actually I was noticing in the comments, some folks were saying the same thing, that's really what it is. And that is why untreated trauma means your needs weren't met. And that's the whole point of restorative justice. It's really like, what do you need to, and so that's what I mean by it's kind of a necessary catalyst that'll occur later for harm or anger. But for me, my toolbox, I try to, again, I have 2 young kids, an 11 and 8-year-old, and the 8-year-old has a lot of unmet needs. And that's just kind of the developmental age he's at, kind of trying to navigate how to, live in the world, especially a pandemic kid going preschool on Zoom was not really effective. And so what does he need? Really social interaction. And I try to think about when he's angry and frustrated because he's not included in something. I take a step back and I really try and use the tools that we have here. And some people call it restorative parenting. I don't know if I'm very good at the restorative parenting. I mean, I'm trying to use that as a toolbox because I'm learning myself. Like this is, even I'm going to guess, even the experts in the room here, right? You have times where you think you have all the tools and then you look around and go, I don't have that tool. I don't have the right screwdriver that'll fit this problem, right? And we hope we can, and we hope we can kind of use another tool and modality that we have in our back pocket that we can kind of tap into and use to navigate in a different way. But it's hard. It's really, really hard to be able to know exactly what's going to fit, right, to solve the problem. And I feel like that's the whole point of restorative justice. It gives you this safe opportunity to try on these other things, and in a way that isn't intended to create harm, but really there's that honesty that we're talking about, where we're trying to make sure that everyone's needs are met. And sometimes that also means you in the room, your needs to be met are to learn how to resolve and help support someone in crisis or who's experiencing anger. And so I feel like sometimes people think that you're going to know it all, and you're not. And Sonya, you just said it. You're not going to know it all, and that's the whole beauty of it. There's a safety there. There's a safety to there's like that. That you don't have to be the expert. So yeah.
Thank you, you guys. Thank you.
All right, I guess that's me.
I think that's where we're at.
I appreciate being on this side of the conversation now. So I want to share really quick that recently, Catherine, Troy, and myself, we were at the Chowchilla Women's Facility in California, and with the Juvenile Offender Committee there, as they call themselves, and we did a screening of this film there. And for me personally, there's some deep learning that I received from that experience, new learning, new reminders, new calling back to. And so my question for Sujatha and Catherine, when we think about the prison within film, I'm going to look at my notes. When we think about the prison within film, for each of you, how can this either inspire or encourage you and us to look at our own pasts in either unexpected or different ways? And I'll hand that over to you to figure out who goes.
Catherine, you want to go first?
Yeah. Sure, I'll go. Either way, yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, making this film was really critical for me to dive in to my past. Actually, it was like a really a really interesting journey to make this film. Well, I essentially came to a point, I would say about 2 years after the film was out, where I was even a little bit embarrassed because um, all of a sudden my childhood abuse and my sexual trauma was like here, here. And I was really amazed at how I've gone into prisons. I made this film about intergenerational trauma, interviewed Sujatha and Sonya, who are survivors of sexual trauma, and yet I was still normalizing my own. And it's just been really fascinating to me how that, even the process, that creative process of making the film was my own healing eventually, like my own, Catherine's own creative circuitous route to get to where I was really able to, as we say about the men in the film, like connect the dots of their past, right? And I guess I'm mentioning this because that was actually my hope when I was making the film, for that to happen for other people as well. I don't think I knew it at the time, but I wanted, like to me, it's a very spiritual film, right? It's like people going into their shadows, and that's what it is. It's shadow work. It's looking at the harms. It's looking at our own trauma. And I just feel that everyone in the film, Sujatha, Sonya, Michael, Troy, Sam, Poon, Eddie, everyone that's in the film, Barry, Nate, are such beautiful examples of that, of ways that we can really go inside ourselves and heal and really look at those hard parts. And so even though I made the film and I was right there in it, it's almost like I'm experiencing it like years later. And so it's really just been this really beautiful and, and hard, like, I'm not going to lie, like hard, still ongoing process of unpacking my own shit, really. And it just keeps, as we all know, it just keeps going. And so it's been really cool to want to make the film, to want that for other people, and then to finally do it myself as well. So yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have like the baggage limitation, right, that they do at the airport. We just keep finding more luggage, right? Every time we unpack something.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Catherine, and thank you for the beautiful question, Michael. And just reflecting, Michael had kindly asked in advance, what questions would we like? And just to double down on, your thoughtfulness. And even in our brief email exchange, we haven't hung out in quite a few years, but I just felt your immediate beautiful care and thoughtfulness and your giftedness at this kind of way of being together. So just wanted to appreciate it. And so, it's one of the things I love, Catherine and Aaron, what you did with this film, the most that felt really important to me is that the humanization of folks who've caused harm, something we need to do, right? And to blur this line between like good guys and bad guys, right? Is like this notion that, that hurt people and healed people heal people, like Michael, Troy, so many others in the film. And so many people that we know that aren't in this film we're all healing ourselves, and we're helping be, healing forces of nature out in the world. What I think is what was most unexpected for me was, Catherine, you were really welcomed me to disarm myself and blur the line for a person who's primarily perceived as someone who's experienced harm, and to be able to talk about the times in which I've caused harm and used violence and all of my past drug use and all these things, right, that that definitely take me out of the good Indian girl category, but just, or whatever, all the things, all the ways I protect myself in order to get by as a brown woman in the world and be taken seriously and whatever. And so the film, and I do it in limited places. Like I will stand up at the National Domestic Violence Conference and tell people, you see me as you're a victim advocate person, but in reality, I have used violence in a relationship. Am I kicked off the stage? Do you kick me out now? Like, do I still get to be here? Well, if you can say that for me, then why don't we say that for all the folks who are locked up, right? Like, my trauma begat trauma within self-harm and outward harm too. And we're all doing that out here, like in limited and larger ways. I don't want to dismiss like the severity and the degree. And at a more fundamental level, the invitation that I think restorative justice calls us to in this really tapping into this gorgeous interdependent web is the possibility of unconditional love. And I can't know if I'm unconditionally loved by any all if I don't show you the dark underbelly of my being, right? And so this thing that we do to all of us where we have to be perfect in order to receive love is so ridiculous. And also that there are these good guys and bad guys when we know that there's harm and it's replicating itself in various ways. And if I want to know that you see me and love me, then I have to. So I have to tell you some of the stuff that's uncomfortable. And so every time I see the film, I cringe because I'm like saying the things, and then I forgot for a while, like I was using it in different places and different teaching contexts and whatever. But then Sonya and I decided to show it to a bunch of teenagers in our lives who I think we both forgot some of the stuff. Our kids were involved in this. And so we, and so my son is like sitting there with his friends, like with his mother talking about the drugs, my son I'm an out survivor. I mean, Sonya and I both are, about our histories with our kids, right? About the harms that we've experienced. And surely we both also, I think there's something about seeing it on the screen. It's like there forever for the world to see that I did these things. And it made me like double down on are you all going to love me unconditionally? Because I want to love you unconditionally. And this is what it requires. Let's do it, And so, gosh, now I'm all emotional too. Like, and so, I think it's just a really that for me. And so then, and I've used the film in teaching spaces in other ways, like workshops that people sign up for. But this last January, I taught a month-long intensive at like a top fancy college thing. And I assigned it to those students, right? And there's these college students who are now here in all my business. And their professor is this person who did these things, right? And I'm glad for it. I'm glad it's keeping me true. And so that is, I think, so on a personal level, I think that encourages it. And I think, again, like what I love about the film is this sort of meta way in which the thing that you are doing by having us all talk about all the things is inviting the audience to do the same thing. And that is the feedback I've gotten from the use of that film. Like the student papers and whatever are like, whoa, like that made me actually have to pause and ask myself some questions. And I really just think that that's the best thing that a film like this can do. So maybe that's kind of the answer to the question, but thank you, Michael.
Thank you to you both.
I feel like I want to like hit the balloon button after everyone's answers for everyone. Like,
wait, there's a balloon button? Oh.
Troy hit the balloon button.
Yes, and Troy had to step out. He's at another conference right now, so.
I am in no way attempting to replace Troy, because that would be impossible. But jumping back on here, do you have if we got a few minutes, it looks like there are a couple questions. Thank you so much for this rich conversation. It's so fun to watch people have conversation that clearly care for and love each other. That is actually like part of healing, I think. One of the questions is, how are the projects going insofar as getting the institution to develop in-house programs? And so, like, what do you need? And I'm assuming it's referring to institution of like maybe prison as an institution, or specifically in California, maybe even specifically in San Quentin.
Well, I know that Troy loves to throw the statistic out, so I'm going to do it on his behalf, which is, there is this idea with media out there, with our news articles that'll come out, that people are really getting behind the restorative justice movement. They'll put I think it was like $380 million, or 300,000 or 300 million, whatever, dollars behind restorative justice programs. And it was like 10 times more amount was earmarked to build more prisons. So I think there really isn't buy-in right now. The institutions are dependent on the financial stability that the carceral system provides, especially in rural communities. That's intended. You're purposely segregating people away from community and away from access to opportunities, and you're dependent on nonprofits and outside organizations to bring these programs inside, and it can change depending on who's in power in that institution at the time. So I don't really think there's a lot of buy-in, as much as they want to get the news blasts. But we can change that. We can absolutely change that.
Yeah, I want to add to that, is like, as someone who, has gone into many carceral settings and worked in the criminal justice system, and it's just, in and out of this world. I mean, like, for me, in creating the film, it was not necessarily so that people in the systems start changing the systems, because I don't feel because I'm very blasé about that, but it's for us to change ourselves, so that then we're putting pressure on those carceral systems, right? We're not separate from them at all. Like, we're punitive to each other out here, so of course we have these very punitive carceral systems. And so the film is really more for the general public and for audiences who don't really know how our carceral systems work, to start thinking about that and how can we change that more, because I know it's not going to happen until that pressure is there, like until we really start thinking about, oh, what does public safety mean to me here on my street, in my home, in my school, in my community, right? It's all connected to how we're treating people on the inside as well.
Can I jump in here too? I appreciate this, and I feel like, Mike, you should say something. So much, because I think the question was about stuff in prison, and I think one of the we shouldn't want, expect, or we shouldn't at all want the institution itself to be doing things for people in prison that clearly have the skills and expertise to do it for themselves. So if there's anything that we should be doing, there are a gazillion men and women in prison who have a million ideas of programs and things they want to do and things they need. And we have incredible people like Mike and other folks who are formerly incarcerated, who we should be supporting going in and out of prison to do that. And I'm saying that because I really want to turn it over to Mike to say something, because I know that that's really important to you.
Thank you. As you know, I'm somebody who usually shies away from getting in the conversation, and this is actually the point that I wanted to get in the conversation, so I appreciate that. And going off of both what Catherine and Sonya, what you're saying, what's coming up for me is, I think, a couple of things, if I can make sense of them outwardly. The first thing is, I need folks to see on the outside, I need folks to see them as no different than folks on the inside, and vice versa. I need folks to accept that we are all part of the same community and we are very much connected. And, I use this example for those who have a hard time making that connection, but there's a prison in very northern California. There's a county there that was very small population. And when they built a prison there and filled it, maxed it out with a population of incarcerated men, they used that pot to then get a Walmart for that county. A Walmart exists at that county because of the population that they used from the prison. And you see that in every county, in every area. There's things that exist in those areas because of the population that's counted. we're very much, and I say we because I still feel incarcerated in some ways. We are very much a part of the community. And so once we can start to see that we are not other, that we are not separate, that we are not removed, and start to see each other in one another, that's where we can break down all these barriers. The other thing that I think is important to name is I need people to see. I know, and not that I'm dismissing this. I want to say I hear this all the time, that the carceral system, the prison system, dehumanizes people. It strips them of their humanity. I'm not saying that's not true. I also want to include in that conversation that these are very full humans. The system did not dehumanize me. It may have tried by design. It did not strip my power from me. And that's one of my biggest messages to the folks that I'm in prison with every week, is that you are powerful beings. It's not theirs to take from you. It's very much yours to own. And so I need folks to see folks who are incarcerated is not just these oppressed, dehumanized people. They're loving, they're kind, they're awesome, they're amazing, they're complex like us. They laugh, they cry, they have deep relationships and bonds. They have remorse and shame and sadness. They're very much the same. And so if we can start to build that conversation to include more of that, I think that's where we can start making those connections. And I'll end with that because I feel like now I'll go on a tangent, but thank you for that.
The perfect ending. Perfect ending.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for that. Michael, I was specifically, as someone whose tear ducts are also fairly active, I remember a certain time in kind of my own telling of my own story and kind of revisiting some of my own story when I somehow it came to me like tears are water, and water waters things and helps things grow, and so like changing my own orientation towards my own tears as like this is water that's helping something grow, helping something heal. I think was a pivotal point for me, and so I would just offer that as like thank you for offering us the gift of both today and even in the film, of your vulnerability and humanity in that way, through those tears. I'm going to just say thank you all so much for this rich and wonderful conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to Erin for some closing announcements as I take all of us out of the stage. Thank you all.
Can I just say one thing real quick before someone asked? If you guys are interested in reaching out or talking to us or having any of the panelists come speak, maybe at an organization you're a part of, you are welcome to email us, and we'll just give the general film email address, and that way, we could save everyone else's inboxes. But it's prisonwithinfilm@gmail.com. Please reach out if you want to connect. So, thank you.
Well, I know I'm reiterating, but so much deep gratitude to all of our guests today for sharing your time and presence and your work and your rawness and your relationships with one another with us. That was, as people have said, such a gift. Before we sign off here, we want to invite you to join us again in May for our next webinar of our webinar series, which will be Wednesday, May 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for a conversation on restorative justice and racial healing with guests Jody Geddes and Tom DeWolf, who are co-managers of Coming to the Table, and host Jonathan Swartz. They will be sharing about the importance of utilizing RJ practices in racial justice and healing work, and you won't want to miss their conversation. You are also encouraged to check out our website for our extensive archive of webinars and to keep up to date about other resources and goings-on at the Zehr Institute. We're deeply appreciative of your collaboration and support always. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to be with you again on May 15th. Have a great afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are. Take care.